Coroners Court is now sitting.
Good morning. Mr Castleton.
Thank you, Your Honour. Your Honour, this is the inquiry into the Border Rockton fire. That fire originated in Victoria, crossed over the New South Wales border and burned into two different local government areas. When this fire crossed over into New South Wales, it was renamed as two separate fires, the Border Fire and the Rockton Fire. These fires were initially managed separately but eventually merged. Your Honour will hear about the cause and origin of the original fire in Victoria, known as the Snowy 9 Banana Track Fire, and the progression of the Border and Rockton fires. On the 29th of December 2019, a fire was detected by air by Victorian authorities near the small town of Wingan River in the northeast of Victoria, between Can River and Malakuta. The detection of this fire followed some intense thunderstorm activity in the region around midday on the 28th of December 2019. This Victorian fire was named the Snowy 9 Banana Track Fire. The ignition of this fire occurred at a time when significant portions of East Gippsland and the northeast of Victoria were already burning as a result of existing fires. And I'll just have displayed now, for Your Honour's benefit, a photograph of the Snowy 9 Banana Track Fire burning around the point of origin on the 29th of December 2019. And there's one further photograph, Your Honour, that I'll have displayed, which again shows the Snowy Banana Track Fire, also on the 29th of December. And this one shows the main front with spotting in a northwest direction. The cause and origin of the original Snowy 9 Banana Track Fire is addressed by Mr Les Veering. He has provided a statement to the court in the brief of evidence. Mr Veering concludes that the fire was started by lightning in the area of origin at 12:54 p.m. on the 28th of December 2019. The location of this lightning strike was recorded as 5 kilometres east-southeast of Can River in East Gippsland. Mr Veering, in his report, states the following: I believe that at the time it was first detected, the fire had already been burning for about 26 hours, undetected due to the smoke conditions. After studying the lightning records and not being able to find any other cause, in my opinion, the Snowy 9 Banana Track was caused by lightning. I'll just have displayed now, Your Honour, a photograph from Mr Veering's report, which shows the likely area of origin of the fire. Your Honour will hear that the Snowy 9 Banana Track Fire spread quickly and fiercely. The progression of the Snowy 9 Banana Track Fire is evident from the collated fire progression maps in Victoria, which are in the evidence of Mr Veering, between 29 December and 6 January 2020. And I'll just have displayed now, Your Honour, a number of mini-maps depicting the spread of the Banana Track Fire. And Your Honour sees on the 31st of December 2019 that the Snowy 9 Banana Track Fire has crossed into the southeast region of New South Wales. But Your Honour sees the significant development of this particular fire in that southeastern portion of Victoria around East Gippsland. And Your Honour also sees that on the 5th of January 2020, this particular fire has crossed again into New South Wales. And Your Honour will come to hear some evidence about that near the small township of Rockton. Mr Veering will give evidence shortly, Your Honour. By 3 p.m. on the 31st of December, the Snowy 9 Banana Track Fire had burnt nearly 85,000 hectares in Victoria. At this time, RFS in New South Wales were advised that the fire was 2 kilometres south of the border. The Snowy 9 Banana Track Fire crossed over into New South Wales at 2 separate locations and on different dates. The first crossover was named the Border Fire. The second crossover was named the Rockton Fire. Detective Senior Constable Glenn Bradley will give evidence in these proceedings in regard to the progression of the Border and Rockton fires and the damage that resulted. Dealing, if I may, firstly with the Border fire, the Snowy 9 banana track fire crossed over into New South Wales between 3 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. on the 31st of December 2019 near Timbilica and became known as the Border Fire. This burned in the Bega Valley local government area. The Border Fire continued to burn in a northerly direction and was declared out by RFS on 4 March 2020. The Border Fire burned for 67 days. The Border Fire damaged an area of approximately 192,500 hectares and damaged or destroyed 439 structures, including 111 homes. I'll just have displayed now for your Honour's benefit a map which shows a number of markers. Your Honour sees in the bottom left-hand corner the first blue marker, which is Wingan River, which is near to the area of origin of the Valley 9 Banana Track fire. Your Honour then sees to the right of that the township of Malakuta, which was heavily impacted by this particular fire in late December, early January of 2020. And then slightly north of that, in New South Wales, the township of Timbilica, which is near to where the fire first crossed over into New South Wales from Victoria. I might just have now displayed for your Honour's benefit a map which shows a little more clearly the point at which the Border Fire crossed the border between New South Wales and Victoria. And that road that Your Honour sees is the Princess Highway. Your Honour, I now come to the Rockton Fire. The Snowy 9 Banana Track fire continued to burn in Victoria throughout this period. On 5 January 2020, whilst the Border Fire was burning in New South Wales, the Snowy 9 Banana Track fire crossed over again to New South Wales at a different location. According to convention, this was considered a new or different fire and was named the Rockton Fire. This fire burned in the Snowy Monero local government area and burned until 6 March 2020. This was a period of 61 days. The Rockton Fire damaged an area of approximately 26,300 hectares and destroyed or damaged 21 structures, including 4 homes. And I'll just have brought up a satellite image similar to the last one Your Honour saw a moment ago. And Your Honour sees a new blue marker towards the top and middle of the screen, which is the township of Rockton. And Your Honour sees the border between New South Wales and Victoria south of that township. The Border and Rockton fires eventually merged on the 5th of January 2020. And Your Honour sees there a map of the final footprint of those 2 fires within their respective local government areas. So the pink shading depicts the border fire, and the olive or green shading represents the extent of the Rockton fire. And of course, Your Honour sees the border between New South Wales and Victoria running a southeasterly direction. As I touched upon a moment ago, there were residences and many structures damaged as a result of both the Border and Rockton fires. And that's best displayed visually by reference to a table contained within Detective Senior Constable Bradley's statement at pages 51 to 52. Dealing firstly with the Border fire, Your Honour sees there were 111 residences destroyed, 8 facilities were destroyed, and 234 outbuildings destroyed. And in relation to damage, 25 residences sustained damage, 12 facilities and 49 outbuildings sustained damage, giving it a total of 439 affected properties as a result of the border fire. In relation to the Rockton fire, we could just scroll down to the table that deals with the Rockton fire, please. You want to see, as I said earlier, that 4 homes were destroyed and a number of outbuildings, totalling 20 affected properties in relation to the Rockton fire. And I might just have displayed now, Your Honour, a selection of photographs of various properties damaged or destroyed by these fires. There's 10 in total. The first 2 that will be displayed, Your Honour, are of the Eden Chip Mill in Edram. And I'm instructed that this particular chip mill was the largest employer in the area, and it was severely impacted by the fires with 100,000 tonnes of wood chips going up into smoke. Apologise, Your Honour, that the network's slow and the other photographs are taking a little longer to load into the system. I'll just try one more time if we can have displayed the remaining 8 photographs. You're right, I might leave it there for the time being because of the technical problems that we're encountering. Your Honour, that concludes my opening remarks in relation to the Border Rockton fire. Could I tender the brief of evidence in relation to that fire? I'm instructed, Your Honour, that that will become Exhibit 16, capital A.
Yes, thank you.
And if it's convenient to Your Honour, could I call, please, Mr. Leslie John Veering, who I understand is in the virtual lobby and can be brought in.
Mr. Veering, can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can, thank you.
All right, you'll just hear from the court officer now.
Mr. Veering, would you like to take the religious oath or the affirmation?
The oath, please.
Thank you. Silence, please. Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say, I do.
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Veering, would you please state your full name?
Leslie John Veering.
And are you a senior investigator and fire investigation coordinator within the Victorian Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning?
Yes, I am.
And have you provided a statement in relation to the cause and origin of a fire known as the Valley 9 Banana Track Fire?
Yes, I have.
Do you have a copy of your statement with you this morning?
Yes, I do.
And is that a statement that you provided to Detective Senior Constable Glenn Bradley?
Yes, it is.
Are there any matters that require correction within that statement, Mr. Veering?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Do you otherwise adhere to the opinions you've expressed therein?
Yes, I do.
Could I just ask you to set out in brief terms, your education, training, qualifications and experience in relation to undertaking a cause and origin investigation into a wildfire or bushfire?
Okay. I completed a fire investigation course in the early 1990s. My qualification before that was in forestry. I have a certificate of applied science obtained in the early 1980s. I undertook fire investigation training in the early 1990s. Since that time, I've been conducting a number of fire investigations, both for for the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, or its predecessors. We have a few, and also for our country fire authority, where I'm a volunteer fire investigator and firefighter with them as well. Over the years, I have conducted probably well in excess of 200 bushfire investigations, and heavily involved with fire from another perspective, where I'm a level 3 incident controller and level 3 operations officer. And over the years, I've attended well in excess of 1,000 fires, bushfires or planned burns, when probably the majority of those I've been in charge of, either running the planned burns or major bushfires. I also now am part of a small group that train bushfire investigators for both the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning in Victoria, along with our CFA, our Country Fire Authority volunteers, and for Fire Rescue Victoria and Victoria Police.
Thank you, Mr. Veering. Turning, if I may, now to that period of time towards the end of December in 2019, were there fires burning in the East Gippsland area in late December of 2019?
Yes, there were a number of fires burning in that area, particularly what we call the Tambo Fire District, which is just a little bit to the west of the Snowy District. The Snowy District is our most eastern district, so centred on the Snowy River, but goes from about an hour through to the New South Wales border, and particularly in the Tambo District, there were, I think from memory, about close to about 10 fires burning in that area, that district alone, and one of those that actually had crossed already into the Snowy District. And at the same time, there also are a number of fires burning in the northeast of Victoria, which is over the Great Dividing Range, pretty much around in behind Bright, Coronial, and right through that area through there.
And by the 28th and 29th of December 2019, are you able to describe what the visibility was like in that area around Can River, Wingan River and Malakuta?
Yes, in fact, I spent some time there actually in my role as incident controller, and it was so smoky in town. I was actually in Orbost, but was not very far away from Can River, and the visibility was extremely poor, probably limited to a few hundred metres on days when we had inversion low, because it's sort of a coastal type area. We're getting nighttime inversions, which basically meant the smoke wasn't rising at all. It was just like having a lid on top of it, so the smoke wasn't rising. Some of the what we call the blow-up fire days, where we had unstable atmosphere, well, those days actually the smoke did clear, but there were a number of days where the visibility was extremely poor, probably limited to a few hundred metres.
Mr. Veering, in that southeastern portion of Victoria, are there fire lookouts placed at different locations to assist with the detection of emerging fire?
Yes, there is.
And do you know whether those particular lookouts in that area around Can River, Wingan River, Malakuta had difficulties with visibilities, as you've just described a moment ago?
Yes, they certainly did. They were still manned even on those bad days, because they can provide a communications link for us. They're sitting high up on hills, on towers, and can provide a good communications backup for us. But as far as visibility and their ability to spot fires, they were very limited.
And do you know from the position that you hold within the Victorian Department of Environment whether aerial reconnaissance in that area was limited in relation to spotting fires or not?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. There was some aerial reconnaissance was put up on the day when the lightning strikes were recorded north of the Princess Highway. But in talking to the fire spotters who were actually in the aircraft, or the air observers we call them sometimes, they said it was very difficult to pick up any new fires that started. You firstly had to be flying almost over the top of them to see them. They are helped a little bit by our lightning tracker system, where they can actually give them a pretty fair guide as to where the fires could be. So they flew over those areas, and I think I did actually detect one new fire on that particular day. But there was a couple others that were burned they didn't detect. They didn't fly that far away from, but it was just so smoky their visibility was very limited.
And in relation to the banana track fire, when was it first detected burning in and around that Wingan River area?
Just check my notes for a second, just to make sure, but the original lightning strikes went through on the 28th of December, and we believe that's when that fire was actually started. It wasn't actually confirmed until the following day, later in that afternoon, which originally picked up by satellite imagery with detecting a hotspot showing up on the map there on our system. And then once that was detected by satellites, a fire spotting aircraft was dispatched to investigate whether it was actually a fire or not. And yeah, once they were fairly close to the fire, they confirmed it was a going fire of significant size. I think something like 300 to 400 hectares in size at that stage.
I'll have displayed shortly, Mr. Veering, some photographs that were taken from the air on the 29th of December. You mentioned satellite and hotspots. Were they images obtained from NASA, satellite images obtained from NASA or not?
Look, I'm not sure. The system we call is MODIS hotspots, but whether it's provided by NASA, I'm not quite sure. I think there are actually a couple of satellite systems that do provide some of this detail, but I'm not actually sure it's provided by NASA.
And is it your understanding that that technology works off detecting heat or significant heat signatures?
That's correct.
And as you said earlier, a hotspot was identified by satellite in the Wingan River area. And as a result of that detection, was aerial reconnaissance sent down towards that general area?
Yes, it was.
And I'll just have displayed now, Mr. Veering, a number of photographs, page 69 of Exhibit 16A. And I'll just ask you whether these photographs are the photographs that were taken in the late afternoon, early evening on the 29th of December 2019?
Yes, they are.
And dealing with the first photograph, is that fire spreading in a northwest direction from the area of origin?
That's correct, yes.
And the next photograph, is that of the same fire showing the southwest flank?
That is correct.
You've mentioned in the caption to that photograph showing intermittent crowning. Could you just explain what crowning means having regard to fire behaviour and fire terminology?
Okay, yes, a crown fire is when the fire is burning both all the surface fuel on the ground, but also it's up in the tops of the trees and burning all the leaves of the trees as well. So it's generally when we've got very significant fire intensity. And yeah, you don't get a crown fire on a coolest day. It's only when the fire behaviour is quite severe, or the extreme fuel load that's causing the fire to behave that way.
Thank you. And then the next photograph, which I understand was taken at about 3:25 p.m, does that show spotting occurring in a northwest direction from the area of origin towards Mount Drummer?
That is correct.
Now, in terms of the column of smoke that we've seen in the earlier photographs, do you know sort of how high the column was rising at that point in time? That is late afternoon, early evening on the 29th of December 2019?
Look, no, I don't know exactly at that time. I did see some stuff at some stage. It was talking about several kilometres, but I can't remember if that was at that time or not.
As a result of the detection of this particular fire around the Wingan River area, it was named the Snowy 9 Banana Track Fire, that's so?
That's correct.
In Victoria, do you know how the naming convention operates in relation to fires or not?
Yes, I do. Each district will give it a number. So number 9 means it was the 9th fire recorded in the Snowy district for that year. And then the first one will be Can River or a local type name that generally most people will recognise, and then it'll be given a local name where it could be Banana Track as the generally the nearest track or river or whatever else that can be identified will be included in the naming convention as well.
When you refer to district, in this case the Snowy district, is that a fire district or is that a local government?
Sorry, that is a fire district.
And do I understand correctly that as at the 29th of December 2019, there were 9 fires burning in the Snowy Fire District?
No, they may not all been burning at once. So some of those that would go right back to the 1st of July, they start their numbering. It's the first fire we get for the year. And because it was such a dry year, I'm not sure when the first one was, but sometimes it could have even been in early July, that first fire. But at the time, initially there was only the one fire in the Snowy district, which actually started in the Tambo district and actually crossed the border, across the Snowy River and then across into the Snowy district. At the time of the 28th, 29th, there were certainly some more fires had actually started, but I'm not sure exactly how many were actively burning in the Snowy district at that time, but it wasn't 9, it was less than that.
And just so I'm clear, Mr. Veering, the naming of fires works off a financial calendar, 1 July to 30 June.
Financial, yes, that's correct.
What happens to your understanding when 2 fires merge? Is there a renaming or do they maintain the same fire name that they were given in the early stages of their development?
No, they will be renamed, and normally it would be the bigger of the fires will take over, or what finished up happening in East Gippsland on that year, because there were so many fires burning and some of them actually joined up, they amalgamate them all and just become the Snowy complex, or the ones back further to the west became the Tambo complex of fires, and they were renamed that. For our record purposes, on our system, those original fires will just be put to safe, and just to reference the fact that they are now called this new fire, which will be the Snowy complex.
Thank you, Mr. Veering. Now, as part of your investigation into this particular fire, did you obtain some lightning strike data to assist in relation to a likely area of origin for the Banana Track fire?
Yes, I did. I originally looked at our FireWeb system, which has used a system called GPATS. It wasn't showing up any lightning strikes in that area. I spoke to the locals about that. They were quite sure it would have been lightning, being such a remote location, but the system wasn't showing anything in there. So I thought, well, maybe it could.
Pausing there, sorry to cut you off, Mr. Veering. The system, you're referring to the GPATS system?
That's correct, yes. Yeah, that wasn't showing up anything in there, so I eventually walked into that location along the, I think it's called Homestead Track initially, and then onto the Banana Track. I spoke to the locals first, is that track open, and could somebody have actually driven in there? They didn't believe the track was open. It's an old track that was actually overgrown. So to confirm that, I drove along the Wingan track to that point and easily confirmed it didn't look like it was drivable, so I actually walked into the location, which was a bit over 5 kilometres, and yeah, confirmed it was not possible to drive a vehicle along that track. I searched along the river area in the vicinity of the area of origin in that area to see if I could find any evidence of a cause of a fire. There was certainly no sign of any human activity in there along the river or any other infrastructure at all. It was quite a remote location. So I certainly found an area where I believe the fire started, where there was some low intensity in a bushfire sense. Where a fire first starts, it's normally at its lowest intensity, and the fire doesn't burn as hot, and it takes a little while for it to build up in intensity and develop into a larger fire. I certainly found evidence of that just to the east of the Wingan River. So I went back, checked the system again, still could find no records. So I then searched another system which is used by the Country Fire Authority in Victoria. It's a weather zone system, and asked my counterpart from CFA could she run that through her system and see what it came up with in that area, and which she did for me and sent me that information, which showed a number of lightning strikes in around that Banana Track area, one quite close to where I believe the fire had actually started, and another 3 or 4 within a few kilometres of that area.
What I might do now is just to bring up on the screen page 65 of Exhibit 16A, which is a map that you've annexed to your report. I'll just see whether we can magnify it anymore. We may not be able to. Now there's a blue star. Is that the point of origin for the Snowy 9 Banana Track fire?
I believe so. I'm not sure. Can I just refer to my notes if that's okay?
Certainly, please. And there's a number of red stars. Do they depict lightning strikes recorded?
There were other lightning strikes in that area.
And as one looks at the blue star, immediately beneath the blue star, sort of northwesterly direction, there's a lightning strike recorded. That is the red star. Is that about 5 kilometres?
Each of those squares you can see on the map, the grid lines there, each one of those is 1 kilometre. So the blue star is about 1 kilometre from the one I've actually got marked there.
And when you were in that general area, did you see any evidence of damage to trees consistent with lightning strike or not?
No, I didn't. The area I was searching was probably around 25, somewhere between 25 and 50 hectares, and in that area there's probably just trying to think how many trees would be, but in the thousands and thousands of trees. So I didn't find any, and even on small fires sometimes where we know it's a lightning strike, you don't always see a tree that's been damaged by lightning. Sometimes it'll just go and hit a shrub and blow it to bits and you don't find it. But often we do find trees where we find a distinctive lightning strike on it as well. But in that case, I didn't find any in that area, but I probably didn't search the whole 50 hectares. There's probably thousands of trees in that area.
And in terms of the area, how would you describe the terrain where you undertook your ground-based examination?
It was relatively flat. It was just sloping down in towards the Wingan River, but apart from that, quite flat with a few small rises, sandy type soil, and the vegetation varied quite a bit with some tallish trees, around at 20 to 30 metres, and in other places there was just scrubby type trees, and then closer into the river you had some swampy type areas with melaleucas and other shrubs.
And in that area of origin, do I understand correctly that that was nowhere near any track in terms of a vehicle to access?
No, on the map it did show up as a banana track, which was banana track, from my understanding, talking to locals, was put in back. There was a significant fire went through that area in 1983. It would have been put in to salvage logs or timber after those fires in 1983. Pretty much hasn't been used since. So even though there was that banana track that ran within, I believe, probably 500 metres of where I believe the fire started, it was overgrown and not accessible. So the nearest drivable track was about 5 kilometres away.
And as you said earlier, you saw no evidence of human activity or infrastructure that could explain an ignition point in that general area of origin.
That's correct. The only other possibility that may have been, which I want to investigate, was could there have been a camper, a walker in there that was walking and camping along the Wingan River. So I searched up and down the Wingan River for any evidence of human activity, and I could not find any. It's a very remote location in there.
You've reached the conclusion, have you not, that the most likely cause of this particular fire was by lightning strike?
That's correct.
And that, in your opinion, the most likely lightning strike occurred on the 28th of December 2019. Do I understand that correctly?
That's correct.
And that, in your opinion, it's probable that this particular fire burnt for a period of time, perhaps in the order of 26 hours before it was detected? That's
correct.
Now, can I just come now to the progression, if I may, of this particular fire, Mr. Veering, by reference to some maps that fire progression maps that you've annexed to your report, starting at page 81. I'll just have that displayed for Her Honour's benefit. Now, this is a fire progression map as at the 29th of December 2019. Is the Valley 9 Banana Track fire that small area of red that sits between Cairn River and Malakuta?
That is correct.
And then if we go to the next fire progression map for the 30th of December 2019, one sees, do we not, some significant development of that fire?
Yes, it is. It certainly ran to the coast on that day.
Do you know what sort of area we're looking at in relation to that red shading? How many hectares or kilometres we might be looking at or not?
I can quickly check my notes, see if that's okay. That stage, on the 30th, early hours of the 30th of December, there would have been flown with an aircraft at night time, most likely an infrared aircraft, and it's had it at 11,000 hectares.
Thank you. And do you know, Mr. Veering, at this point in time, what, if any, strategy had been devised in relation to suppression or containment, or not?
Yeah, at that stage there was very little strategy around suppression, just given the enormity of the fires that were in the landscape at the time. You can see back to the west some very significant fires that were taking up a lot of scarce resources anyhow. So there were very little resources available to do suppression work on that fire. And also you can see from some of those previous photographs from the air that the chances of putting that fire out were very minimal. Given the spotting, we put in even we're using aircraft initially, they would lay retardant around the fire, and the fire would just keep spotting over the top of it or burning through that retardant because it was so dry. So at that stage, there was no plan really to put the fire out. It was just trying to minimise the damage and look after the safety of people. So the plans were more about evacuating. There was a number of campers in that area along the coastal areas there, get those people out and safety, and also putting a lot of public warnings around Malakuta. There was, at that time of year, Malakuta is a very popular tourist area, so it's more about developing plans around the safety of people.
Thank you. We might then move to the next fire progression map on the 31st of December. Did, firstly, the Snowy 9 banana track fire take a significant run on the 31st of December?
Yes, it did. We had a significant day on the 31st. It was quite a warm day, and then we're followed by a westerly or southwesterly wind change, and most of those fires burning in those areas that day took quite significant runs on that day. And that one, as you can see, head across towards Malakuta and then back up towards eventually into New South Wales. Yes,
and we see that the fire has progressed by the 31st of December into New South Wales, heading towards Timbilica. One also sees that the fires that were burning in the East Gippsland region have also taken a significant run to the southeast, consistent with those prevailing winds you've just described, correct?
That is correct. There were a number of individual fires burning further to the west of this fire that joined up on that day.
This map that's displayed now, Mr. Veering, has a number of black crosses. Do they depict lightning strikes?
That is correct, yes.
It appears then that on the 31st of December that there was significant lightning strikes in southeast New South Wales and north east Victoria.
That is correct, yes. We had enough trouble with the fires we were managing as it was, and then to get all that lightning coming through and starting some more fires as well, it's just made things even worse. And
one also sees a number of orange shaded squares. Do they reflect hotspots?
Yeah, that's been overlaid with the satellite imagery where hotspots were showing up, and most likely the line scan aircraft that we use is the infrared camera that flies over the fires. It's not flying over all the time. It might fly over depending on the weather and availability, where they're a limited resource. So we haven't got access to them all the time. But they might fly the fire every maybe perhaps twice a day. So sometimes I'll use the satellite imagery to give a little bit more update on where the fire actually is at the time. But again, the satellite imagery is not as accurate as the line scan, but because of significant heat coming out of there, it was used extensively to try and give us more up-to-date locations where the fire was.
I understand. If we then move forward to the 4th of January on page 87, again to show the progression of the fire, both within Victoria and also in that portion of southeastern New South Wales. And again, just dealing with hotspots, there's a great number of hotspots recorded or overlaid on this map. Do you know whether the fire may have been burning where those hotspots were or not?
Look, no, I don't know for sure. It's something we haven't really used until the 2019-20 fire season. It's probably some more advances in the satellite technology, so I can't be sure. I'm probably a bit of a layman in that area, but my feeling was that yes, it would be, but I can't be 100% sure.
And finally, the last map I wish to display, Mr Veering, is the next map, page 88 of Exhibit 16A, which is the 5th of January 2020. And is it your understanding that the fire crossed again into New South Wales on the 5th of January 2020?
That is correct.
Near to a town known as Rockton?
Look, I don't actually know the New South Wales town, but that's a town further to the, I suppose we call it the northwest run of that fire.
And by this stage, one sees significant development, progression of the fires in East Gippsland. Had it been given a new name for the fire that we see burning in that portion of Victoria at this time or not?
I can't actually remember at what point they changed the naming, because there were a number of fires burning in there that actually joined up. I believe it eventually was changed to the Snowy Complex, but the exact data that I can't actually recall. And normally what they would do would they'd probably keep the most significant fire if it was deemed to be the Cannon River Banana Track number 9. They might change the name, but for our record keeping, they probably still use fire number 9. But I'm not sure the exact date when that actually happened.
Thank you. And just finally, in relation to the Snowy Complex fire that was occurring in Victoria, do you know how long that burnt for and when it was ultimately declared out?
I should know. I was there for a fair bit of it. I didn't spend much time at home that summer, but just before Easter. So I can't remember when Easter was. That year's all rolled into one now, but certainly late March, something around that, before it was finally contained.
And were there a number of townships evacuated as a result of that particular complex fire?
Yes, there was. Probably the biggest. There were certainly a number of small communities that throughout the forest that were heavily impacted, and some lost a lot of loss of buildings and things. Some little communities, but probably the most significant being Mallacoota. But Mallacoota was probably the biggest issue because the amount of tourists were there. I think it was estimated about, I'm not sure what Mallacoota's normal population is, it might only be 1,000 people, but at that time of year it was estimated about 10,000 people were in at Mallacoota. So they certainly were advised earlier to try and evacuate. We don't have a policy in Victoria of compulsory evacuations, but they were advised to leave the area a couple of days before the big blow-up event. Some elected to do so, and many didn't. They believed they were going to be, fairly safe. Mallacoota's on the ocean, so and a significant river running into it as well. So I think most people believe it. Unfortunately, that it wouldn't be as bad as what it was, so they elected to stay, and then pretty much became trapped in at Mallacoota. There was certainly some great work undertaken between the fire agencies and local police to come up with plans on how to protect those people, and then eventually evacuated out. A number of them actually by, I think it was the Navy assisting by boat. They were taken out. A few boat trips. The majority of them actually got out. It was some time before the roads were opened up. There was some, and the roads were very heavily impacted. Most of the roads run through heavily timbered forest areas, and it was quite dangerous. There was trees across roads and trees burning on the edge of the road, quite dangerous, and roads were not open for some time. So it would have been a massive job to get them out by air, but yes, the majority were moved out by boat.
Thank you, Mr. Veering. They are my questions.
Yes, Mr. Veering, I'll just see if there's any other questions for you. Mr. Newton?
No questions, Your Honour.
Mr. Glascott?
Thank you, Your Honour. I have no questions.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Mr. Veering. You're excused.
Thanks, Your Honour.
Your Honour, the next witness this morning is Detective Senior Constable Glenn Bradley. I call Detective Bradley.
Silence, please. Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say, I do.
Have a seat, thanks, Detective.
Detective, would you please state your full name?
Glenn Bradley.
And are you a Detective Senior Constable within the New South Wales Police Force attached to the State Crime Command Fraud Unit?
Yes, that's right.
And have you previously been attached to the State Crime Command Arson Unit?
Yep, that's right.
And were you assigned as the officer in charge to carry out an investigation into the Border Rockton fire?
That's right.
Do you recall when you were first assigned that task?
Mid-January 2020.
And have you, as a result of your investigation, completed a statement assigned by you on the 6th of July 2021?
That's right.
And do you have a copy of that statement with you today?
I do.
Are there any matters that require correction or not?
Not that I know of, no.
I just want to ask you firstly about your understanding of how in New South Wales fires are named and whether there's a particular convention that one follows when it comes to naming bushfires or wildfires.
Yeah, so there's a few things to consider. So if a fire ignites within New South Wales, it's given a name with a locality around that ignition point. And should a fire cross a LGA boundary, local government area boundary, it's given a new name and managed by a different fire control district.
And as part of your investigation, did you find any difficulties having two different names essentially of the one fire?
It's difficult in the sense that there's two separate figures you need to consider for the one ignition point. Obviously getting figures and totalling them together and putting them together in a brief is somewhat difficult sometimes.
If we take, for example, boundary fences, are you able to give a specific figure as to how many boundary fences were impacted by the border fire, for example?
I cannot, no, sorry.
Similarly, in relation to livestock losses, are you able to give a precise figure in relation to livestock losses for the Rockton fire?
No, I cannot, sorry.
And is that because the figures you have in relation to those two matters have been drawn from a number of local government areas?
Correct, yes.
Could I just have displayed, please, page 9 of Exhibit 16A, which shows the footprint of the Border Rockton fire. In relation to the local government areas, in relation to the border fire, which local government area was impacted by that fire?
The Bega Valley.
And which fire control centre or IMT, Incident Management Team, was responsible, to your understanding, for the border fire?
It was managed in Bega.
And we see there, do we not, a map that shows the extent of the border fire, which is in the pink shading?
Correct, yes.
And there are a number of yellow shaded circles within that pink shading. What do they depict?
They're all the destroyed residences within that footprint.
And in relation to the border fire, and if you need to refer to your notes, by all means, please do. How many structures, to your understanding, were damaged or destroyed as part of the border fire?
Just bear with me. So there was 111 destroyed residences in border fire, 8 destroyed facilities and 234 destroyed outbuildings.
If we just go back to that map, please. And were there any fatalities or significant injuries as
No,
part of the border fire?
no, there wasn't. No.
And in relation to damaged residences,
Yes.
how many residences were damaged as part of the border fire, to your understanding?
Yep, so there's 25 damaged residences, 12 damaged facilities and 49 damaged outbuildings.
And in relation to the Rockton fire, we see there to the left or to the west a green area shaded. Does that depict the Rockton fire?
Yes, that's right.
And in terms of damage to structures, how many residences, to your understanding, were destroyed as part of the Rockton fire?
4.
And were there any outbuildings destroyed?
10.
And how many outbuildings were damaged?
Damaged outbuildings, there was 5.
And finally, in terms of homes, were there any homes damaged as a result of the Rockton fire?
Homes damaged, just 1.
And what local government area did the Rockton fire sit within?
The Snowman Era, LGA.
And in terms of a fire control centre or incident management team, was it being run out of Bega as well? Or
No, the Snowman Era.
so there was a different fire district that was coordinating the management of the Rockton fire.
Correct, yes.
Now, in terms of the fire crossing over into New South Wales, from your investigation, when did that occur?
So it initially crossed over near Timbilica on the 31st of December 2019, and then again it crossed again in the vicinity of Rockton on the 5th of January 2020.
I'll just have brought up page 11 of your statement as detective, which shows a satellite image of New South Wales, and just so we can orient ourselves to those particular townships that you've just mentioned. I'll just see if we can scroll down a little, thank you. Now, one sees faintly the border between New South Wales and Victoria that ends at Cape Howe. The freeway or the highway designated A1, is that the Princess Highway?
That's correct, yes.
And as one runs from Alfred National Park, which is near to where this fire originated at Wingan River,
Yes.
one runs, generally sort of north to south access along the Princess Highway, A1, one gets to Timbilica.
Yes.
How far is Timbilica from the border? Do you know, Detective?
I don't know that. It's within 10 kilometres.
And from your investigation, did the fire cross over into New South Wales between 3 or 3:30 p.m. on the 31st of December 2019?
Correct, just to the west of the Princess Highway.
And in relation to it crossing over again, did it cross the border on the 5th of January 2020,
Yes.
near towards the township of Rockton?
Yes.
And do you see Rockton in the top left-hand corner?
Yes.
And do you know what the distance is between Rockton and Timbilica as the crow flies or not?
I don't know, sorry.
Now, at some point did the Rockton and the border fire merge?
Yes.
Did that occur, to your understanding, on the 5th of January 2020?
Yes, that's right.
And when that merger occurred, did the incident management teams change at all, or were they still being, those two fires, or one fire now being managed separately out of either Snow Monero Fire Command or Bega?
To my knowledge, they'll still managed separately by Bega and Snow Monero.
And do you know what the strategy was when the fires crossed into New South Wales? Was it one of suppression, containment, or property protection?
No, because the fire was burning out of control and it was quite large. By that stage, it was 85,000 hectares burnt in Victoria at that stage. So I believe the strategy was to property protection and emergency warnings and evacuations of towns.
And in relation to, firstly, the border fire, was it declared out on the 4th of March 2019?
Correct, yes.
And to your understanding, did it burn for about 67 days?
Yes, that's right.
And do you recollect when the Rockton fire was ultimately declared out? Was it the 6th of March?
Yes, 6th of March, yes.
2020?
Correct.
And I think I incorrectly said 2019 in relation to the border fire.
2020.
And how many days did the Rockton fire burn for, do you know, Detective?
1 days, yeah.
And in relation to the Rockton fire, were there any fatalities or significant injuries as a result of the Rockton fire?
No.
Yes, thank you, Your Honour. They are my questions for this witness.
Mr Newton, do you have any questions?
No questions, Your Honour.
Mr Glascott, do you have any questions? Might have gone.
I understand that Mr Glascott may have dropped out, Your Honour.
All right. Thanks very much, Detective.
Thank you, Your Honour.
Your Honour, that concludes the evidence in relation to the Border Rockton fire. Your Honour now has the benefit of the documentary material contained within Exhibit 16A, together with the oral testimony from Detective Senior Constable Bradley and Senior Fire Investigator from the Victorian Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, Mr Les Veering. At the later stage in Your Honour's inquiry into the 2019-2020 bushfire season, those assisting Your Honour will formally address Your Honour on the cause and origin of the Border Rockton fire. In that regard, Your Honour, I can foreshadow now that a formal submission is likely to be made that the general area of origin of the fire was at a location proximate to the Banana Track in Wingan River, between Cann River and Malakuta in the northeast of Victoria. The cause of the fire was a lightning strike at approximately 12:54 p.m. on 28 December 2019. At this time, the fire was referred to as Snowy 9 Banana Track. The fire then crossed into New South Wales at a time between 3 and 3:30 p.m. on the 31st of December 2019, near the township of Timbilica, at which point it was named the Border Fire. Then on 5 January 2020, the fire crossed again into New South Wales in the Snowy Monero local government area, where it became known as the Rockton Fire. Would Your Honour kindly stand this fire inquiry over to the second stage of Your Honour's inquiry more generally to the 5th of September 2022?
Yes, I will.
May it please Your Honour. Finally, just one matter of housekeeping, Your Honour. Can I tender a supplementary brief of photographs and videos for the far southern region? I understand that material has been served on interested parties. And could Your Honour mark that Exhibit 17, please?
Yes, that's Exhibit 17. Thank you, Mr Castleton.
Your Honour, that concludes the evidence in relation to the far southern region fires and related inquests. Your Honour, on Monday, the 27th of September, my learned friend Ms Ward will open the Coronial cluster fire inquiries and related inquests.
Thank you, Mr Castleton. We will adjourn today and resume on Monday at 10 a.m.
May it please the Court.